I am going to go ahead and call our third meeting of the NSRP work group to order. Again, we really appreciate your time this morning, and it's good to see everyone on a beautiful day in Austin. I hope it's beautiful in your hometown, but if not, I hope you can stay for lunch in beautiful Austin. So what we're going to do first is consider the minutes from the past two meetings. You may recall that in the last meeting, you requested some changes to the October minutes. All of you have received those revised minutes. Do we have approval for the October minutes? Any changes or requests on October? Okay. Does everyone approve the October minutes? Great. No nays, so the October minutes are approved. Was there a nay or a question for someone joining on the phone? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. October minutes are approved. So our most recent meeting, you had a chance to look at those minutes, I hope. Any questions about those minutes? Callers online, any questions? Okay, the most recent meeting, which was January, those minutes are also accepted or approved. Perfect. Great. So what we'll do next is we are going to call roll. I'm going to defer to my friend and colleague, Dr. Eklund, to do that. Mr. David Young, who is also helping coordinate these meetings, is one of our callers this morning. So Dr. Eklund will do that since she's here in person.
Thanks, Ginger. Okay, Gail Acuna said she wouldn't be coming. I just wanted to check and be sure. She wasn't able to be with us. Julie Arteaga, and please excuse my pronunciations if I've got them wrong. She was going to call in from Navarro. Julie, are you with us on the phone? Okay, Tracy Cooper.
I'm here.
Julie Davis. Marla Urban Roseman. I got that right? Okay. And this one, this is a no. Nancy Farrenwald is going to call in.
I'm here.
Welcome. Thank you. Janice Hooper. Stephen Johnson. I have not seen. Deborah Jones.
Here.
Linda Lane. Pamela Lauer.
Here.
Beth Merwin.
Here.
Jonas New.
Here.
Brenda Nichols is going to call in. Beverly Skloss.
Here.
Catherine Tart.
I'm here.
Okay, and this is the harder one. Poldy Search.
Poldy Church.
Church, thank you. Thank you for helping. And Tasuya is, I believe I saw here. Yes. Welcome. Sally Williams.
Here by phone.
Wonderful. Linda Yoder.
Here.
Good. Cindy Zolnirik is here. Okay, that's not her. And then David Young, I'm just going to call in, make sure he's on the line. David, were you able to join us? Thank you.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And I'm going to go back to those who were going to call in because I heard some people come in. So Julie Arteaga.
I'm here now.
Wonderful. And then I think we had Brenda Nichols. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Yes. Oh, Nina. And there you are. Okay, thank you. Yep, you were hiding, grouped in a different spot. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Just a reminder on some logistics. So this meeting is being webcast. So while we're certainly able to hear each other in the room, for those who are watching from home and your colleagues that are joining by phone, they cannot hear you unless we use our microphones. So please remember to do that. You push the little button, and when the light turns red, your mic is hot. People can hear you. And then to turn it off if you don't want to be heard, just push the button again, and when the light goes out, your mic is no longer hot. So thank you for that. It's just a courtesy for those watching online. All right, so next we want to talk about, as we move through the agenda, we're going to,
This is
oh, yes.
David.
Hi, David.
David Young. If I can interrupt for a moment, I am watching online, but all I'm getting is the screen without the actual video feed. So if our folks in the control room could help with that, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, please, folks in the control room, come check with us if there's any issues, so that we can help. And also, those of you calling in, please give us a periodic update to let us know if the video feed is working. Thank you for bringing that up, David. So, the third item on our agenda is to discuss ways of improving the state's efforts to address nursing shortages. We tried to get a little bit of a head start on that third item by sending you a very brief one-question survey. Was sent out this week, yesterday. So thank you all who took the time to respond to the survey. But we recognize that it was a very it was a quick way to gauge what you were thinking and to help you also know what we were hearing in the meetings. So we kind of took a quick survey of what we were hearing you talk about as the major issues with NSRP. We put them in a list. We asked you to rank order those challenges in the ways, what would you address first kind of thinking. But because it was so quick, we want to take a moment and pause on that so that you can think about that question again now that you've had time to think about the challenges and what we've identified in the meetings. So you'll see in front of you the survey again, because we heard from most of you, but not from all of you. So what we would like to do is to think about this question one more time for just 10 minutes. Just take 10 minutes to look at this again and go ahead.
And I did want to add, one of the concerns that was raised was that there might have been a few additional pieces. We really tried to use your words and give some examples of the conversations we were having around those areas in terms of the examples for some solutions we included after some of the challenges, just to sort of spark your memory in terms of the conversation. But I think there were some concerns that there might have been a few things that were left off, or particularly did we need to, for example, break out capacity into two different issues. So we wanted to give everyone this opportunity before we sort of go through the process of ranking it again, to add anything they think should have been on here, because we wanted to be really clear that people were comfortable with how this was represented. Again, we tried to use your feedback, your comments, but we wanted to be sure about that, and that's why we thought we'd have everyone kind of do it again. I'm glad you all had a chance to see it. You've thought about it. Most of you probably go through the same way, but we did want to give you that opportunity. So is there, yes?
Well, point of clarification, the nursing loan repayment program is a
Yes.
totally separate
It is.
separate issue and separate funding and
that came up in a lot of the discussion, and I think maybe it makes sense in terms of something people could talk about and think about in the broader issue, but maybe it makes sense in terms of thinking about the challenges of this program to cross that off. Would people agree? Because it is kind of an anomaly here. Okay, good comment. And that one is 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 down. We had one person, in terms of those of you who did fill it out, we had one person who suggested additions, and I just thought it would be helpful for everyone to weigh in and rank this, but it had components to it, and the other response was the challenges are implementation, communication, and reporting challenges. And my sense is a lot of these already are implementation, that's kind of broad, but reporting and communication challenges, I was reading with challenges with some of the RPA code reporting, working with the your reporting officials to make sure all that's done correctly, and then communicating information about how this works. Is that what was intended? Does that sound like, I'm seeing some nods. So would people like to add that to their list as something we could rank as communication and reporting challenges as something folks might want to weigh in on? So if you could do that. And we left room for several others, so if there's anything else that emerges in this conversation, we can add that too. Okay, and yes?
I had the statement that many nurses are not from Texas. When this program was first introduced, the over under 70, it didn't differentiate. It did differentiate, it had to be Texas schools. It did not differentiate if the students were Texas residents.
Correct.
Currently, however, that was changed, and currently, only Texas residents are eligible to be counted in the increase of graduates. So I don't know that that is,
That's not my understanding. I'm looking at those who run the data and administer the program. That's not my understanding. It's that someone would have to be in a program that had a presence in Texas. So if you came from Oklahoma and attended a nursing program at UT Austin, you would be included in the graduates. Is
that was the issue with the particular school that had a number of enrollees that were, because it was an all-online program, they could count all of those students. My understanding is that was changed, and they could only count Texas resident
Right,
graduates.
and that's although funding is not available for fully online program graduates for out of state. So that's that statement that it is in fact not available for those graduates. But I think that, I think the comment that came up in the prior meeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that people were concerned that there were individuals even who were in a program that had some kind of a Texas presence that was maybe hybrid, or maybe they came from out of state to a nursing school here, and that they were being counted or there was confusion and people didn't understand that those people who were fully online are not counted. I'm not sure which, and we can certainly remove this if there was some misunderstanding about what was meant. If there doesn't seem to be a concern about folks coming in, and we can leave it and then we can see. I mean, that's one way to do it. If people are concerned even beyond those online students who aren't included, we can leave this. Is that okay?
If I could add,
yes.
To my knowledge, the way Julie stated it is correct. If it is an out-of-state student that's enrolled and attends classes at a Texas institution, they are counted. But if they are an online student from out of state, they're not counted.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. All right, well, we'll leave it for now, and I think now people fully understand it. Was there an interest in breaking out the capacity challenge into 2 buckets? Because I think we heard capacity tied to and tied to clinical, and perhaps that would be the next item, but I think there was also some question if capacity is too broad to just express it this way. So that would be, we're happy to break it out if there are concerns. Okay.
I think,
yes.
I think when I looked at capacity, I did think about whether it was faculty related, because we don't talk about that in the options. So I think it would be important to at least clarify what things are considered with capacity, at least provide those in parens around that.
So we could have capacity and then in parens faculty for that top item when you rank that. And then do we want to have a capacity in terms of issues with students or space? How about capacity space?
Which is different than clinical space.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the lack of clinical spaces, would you consider that the sort of clinical space capacity issue? So we've got that, but for the second other at the bottom, then let's add capacity and put in parens. Would it be just pretty much space or space and equipment, or do you think I'm sorry? Just facilities, yeah. That's a little broader than space, okay. Well, the faculty, so what we have now, just everyone's got it, the first capacity that's very top on the list would be faculty. Then we have lack of clinical spaces that's already there next, and we realize that's a capacity issue. And then the second other on the bottom, if everyone could just write in capacity and then in parens or dash facilities. So that way we're really being a little more specific on that very broad issue.
One more that as I read through it and as I thought more about it was, we talked a lot, it was talked a lot in the last 2 meetings about the need for well, I guess this could kind of fit with capacity, but I was thinking a type of over 70 program that included funding for increase in graduate enrollments. I know we capture it in the regular program, but not necessarily, we capture it as graduations, but not necessarily are there funding available for increasing the enrollment in our graduate programs, which then leads to faculty. So whether that's a whole separate issue or whether that's included with the capacity of faculty. But I at least want it to be known that I think we do need to consider whether we need additional funding to help that supply.
So we do have, if you look at, it's right smack in the middle of the item, selecting the correct degree level populations for inclusion. Do you think that would represent your comment?
Right.
Okay,
that
yeah.
will do it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. We tried to get the issues. All of them we thought had emerged, but again, that's why we wanted to have one more opportunity. Anything else before we give you 5 minutes to just go back through? Hopefully, because everyone saw this yesterday, they had a little chance to think about it, and I know many of you responded. So if there's nothing else, and we do have someone waiting in the wings that after you complete this, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to present some data, and he's going to do some quick tabulations. He's got a spreadsheet with formulas ready, so we're able to see what this looks like. So if you could go ahead and just by hand rank order, you can just go through 8 if you'd like.
Julie, I have
Yes.
2 clarification
Sure.
questions.
Oh, please.
I'm sorry.
Please, that's why we're doing
And
this.
yes, and it's with the nurses, not from Texas. So
Okay.
Is that undergraduate and graduate? Does that include both? I'm looking to Mr. Buchanan.
I would say what I stated applies to both.
Yeah.
Okay, just asking for that clarification. And then the second clarification is we also have universities who are not from Texas. Are they receiving that funding?
No. This
Okay, I'm just making sure.
This
asking for that
program is
clarification.
just for the institutions in Texas. As many of you are probably aware, and I know Dr. Johnson isn't here today, but there is interest on the part of some of the career institutions for being part of this as well. So we have some representation there on this group to think about that. But right now, it's pretty specific in terms of who's eligible. We have our nonprofits, our ICUT institutions, our 2-year, our 4-year, our HRIs, and there are some programs at hospitals, and I'm not sure specifically how we classify those, but there are a couple of those that are included as well that have nursing schools that are nonprofit, is my understanding.
So I think when we met with the deans and directors, and I don't know who, did anybody from the coordinating board present? No. But when we do talk about it, we just talk about it in kind of a full measure. So maybe we should always say something that there are limitations to who can apply. I'm just, because then it starts getting
You want to put
confusing.
that in as a challenge,
Yeah,
because
just
that
as
might be
maybe-
something that, let's add that then, and at the second to last other
Because I heard about
limitations.
people talking about, well, how do I apply, and should I be applying? And so it becomes if you're not eligible, you can just forget you're listening to this conversation, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, that's a good point. So that's certainly
maybe
a
that's in the
challenge for many.
communication piece. I don't know.
Yeah, no, but
Okay.
that's certainly a challenge for many institutions. So
Thank
we'll-
you. Thank you.
we'll
Could I
definitely
just add,
that.
could I add something?
Sure.
Jan Hooper from the Board of Nursing. As I look through these, and you can see there's so many issues in nursing education, but we really need to keep coming back to the focus of, will working in this area help to produce more new nurses for Texas? That's the main issue. And some of these are barriers to increasing enrollment, and I'm not sure how much time we should spend on those. I think those might be issues for other venues. But that's what as I look at it again and hearing the conversation, I'm thinking we really need to focus on the shortage of nurses and how the money can be used to grow new nurses.
And I've got a little data I'm going to share on that this morning, but do we want to have an item, and I'm looking through because I know, of course, we spent a lot of time talking about that. Do we want to have an item where a challenge is ensuring that we increase new licensure nurses, and if people feel like that's really a big challenge with all of this, I know there's a lot of the other challenges lead to that, but we could certainly include that.
I do want to commend our programs because every year they have increased enrollments and increased graduates, and we've had more candidates take the NCLEX exam each year.
So let's just put a challenge is how to focus on increasing new licensure nurses. And let's just put that, since we have one more open space, that seems to work very well, and we've filled all our other boxes.
We do have that,
Yes.
the one that says prioritization of initial licensure nurses that's listed.
Oh, I'm sorry, that is, I thought we had included it there,
Yes.
and I just looked too quickly. Okay, thank you. It seemed to me it was...
This is Nancy Farnwald. I just want to build on
Yes.
that last comment and say that I too, when I look at these items, I found myself highlighting what can our task force strategically do about these things. And what I heard in that comment was that, lack of clinical space is not necessarily something we can do something about. That's a capacity issue in the health systems, and then capacity of our buildings and things like that. That's bigger than this. But capacity of having adequate faculty, this program should be addressing. So there are just a few of them that I feel like this program isn't targeted for. And then nursing loan repayment program, is that part of?
Well, we decided to remove that from the list, and
Okay.
And I will add that I think that this was really just intended to spark discussion, and it's already done so, and we hope it will continue to do so when we work in the breakout groups. We wanted you to have a little more information to work on when we do break out into those groups. So I don't want anyone to feel like we're making some kind of final decision about what's most important. I think it's just helpful to kind of have everything in front of us, think about what might be missing, and just get a sense from the committee of what really is going to bubble to the top. And we understand that there's caveats, there's all kinds of overlaps and intersections, but we thought it might help to focus your small group discussions. And if you feel it doesn't, and just coming back to looking at the whole list is helpful, it's, of course, this is your group, and we want you to use it in a way that's most effective. Ed, did you want to share something?
I wanted to address Dr. Tart's question in a little more detail, if I could. The criteria for being eligible to apply for the program, in describing that generally, it's going to exclude all for-profit entities, okay? Any kind of trade school or whatever that's doing nursing is not going to qualify. There are perhaps, so generally, if you are a nonprofit private institution, you can qualify. I qualify that as saying generally. It will, in some cases, depend upon who your accreditor is, because that is written into the statute. So, but generally speaking, if you're a for-profit institution, you will not qualify. If you're a private nonprofit, generally you will qualify.
Thank you for that additional detail. Okay, well, I think let's take our 5 minutes with the understanding that people might want to add things. We're going to use this. We want you to use this in the way that's most effective for you, but we just thought it might be useful to get a little clarity on what areas people think are most important to help focus the breakout group discussions. So if you're not comfortable filling it out, that's just fine, but those of you who wish to, if you could go ahead and number, and you can go through 8, you could number through 6 if that's just what you're comfortable with, but I think we've got a system to quickly plug in and just get some sense of what has risen to the top in terms of the key issues, and we can take a look, and that could lead to some discussion too about if it's really accurate, and then I'm gonna, once we've done this, I'm going to, well, I guess for now I'm going to hand it over to Ginger, but we'll give you 5 minutes. Does that sound good?
Just one more review for the callers online. So item 1 is now capacity parenthetical faculty. Item 5 is deleted. Nursing loan repayment program is deleted. The first other is communication and reporting. The second other is capacity, parenthetical, facilities. The third other is understanding limitations on who can apply. And as Julie stated, we were culling the challenges we heard in the meetings from our notes and from the minutes of the meeting. This is truly just a guide discussion, so a reminder of what we've all talked about so far. It's great, the idea that maybe some of these are not where we should focus, so don't rank them high. And let that guide your thinking. Okay, great. And now we will for sure stop for 5 minutes.
And this is David Young. For those folks who are calling in, we did email the survey form to you in an Excel spreadsheet. So if you would fill that out and if you would email that to me, I would appreciate it. My email address is david.young, Y-O-U-N-G, at thecb.state.tx.us. Again, that's david.young at thecb.state.tx.us.
And it's actually up on the screen for those who are listening at home, David, so they've got your email handy dandy right at the bottom of what they're seeing on their computers. So
okay, great.
hopefully that'll work.
Unfortunately, the screen is not showing on the
Yeah,
webcast.
we have some folks who are able to see it. We've checked here, so I don't know if we're working on it. I don't know if it's your equipment or the other folks listening in. Are you able to see the screen for the call-in meeting?
Yes.
Yes, this is Colby. I will say I haven't received the email yet, so we'll just come along as best we can.
I'm sorry, who was that who didn't receive it? Because we'll have David send it right to you.
This is Poldy Church.
Oh, Polly, yeah. Polly didn't receive it, David, from University of St. Thomas. Do you think you could send that to her?
Hi, this is Linda Yoder. I didn't receive it either.
Sorry, I just got it.
Oh, okay. Good.
Thank you.
And let's make sure Linda Yoder gets it emailed, and we should be all set.
And if you're not able to see the webcast yet, try refreshing your screen.
I'm sorry, did you say Linda Yoder didn't receive the survey?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, we'll get it to you.
Just heard some new folks joining us. If people are just listening in, the committee is working on a survey at the moment, and we will be reconvening or moving forward in just a few minutes.
This is Brenda Nichols. David, could you please resend that to me? I thought I had it, but I can't find it in my emails.
Sure. And who is this speaking?
Brenda Nichols at lamar.edu.
Sure. I'll send that right to you.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Okay, I'm seeing a lot of screen time happening with our work group, so I think that's a visual signal that you are done. Is that correct? Callers, do you need more time ranking? Okay, great. If you will return your survey to David, we're going to collect your surveys here, and then we will move on to a data presentation from Dr. Julie Eklund. Actually, Julie, what you? Okay, Julie will be the collector. Well, thank you for doing this. We understand that it's not the end-all, be-all of everything, but it helps shape the conversation because, again, it's what we've heard so far. And if there are holes, we need to fill them. And if there are places that we need to direct attention away from, now is the time to do it. Thank you, Gordon, for tabulating those results. Makes it sound like we're running a contest. We're going to tabulate, the judges have submitted their scores. No. So we're going to get Julie's data presentation. You did receive some of these data in your packets prior to the meeting, but what we'd like to do is take a few moments to walk through, because I know some of these are data points that you have been interested in. So Julie, I'll hand it over to you.
I think I'm ready. Thank you. And I'm actually going to be walking through the material that I think everyone has received, and we've got it up on the screen, or hopefully we can get it up on the screen now for those of you who are watching and listening in. Let me just scroll through. This is our full packet. I'm going to scroll through the minutes. The first document, and this is all data that you requested that we share at the last meeting. We don't have nearly as much as our prior meeting, but we wanted to make sure we got this to you. Someone had asked at the last meeting, because we provided a lot of information about nursing outcomes in terms of wages, where we were finding people in industry, that type of thing. They wanted to know the methodology that was used. And so Dr. Chelsea Moore, who's actually just slipped in, I noticed a moment ago, is with us again. She helped with this information, and she provided a methodology so that you can read through and have a little context for that data that we shared last time. So I don't know if there's any questions about that. I'm happy to answer them or have her answer them. And then we also asked her to rerun some information in a format that you thought would be more helpful. So this table might remind you of the information that we went through the last time. It's basically, for this particular one, we're looking at our community and technical colleges and just looking at our associate degree earners. I think we had some other groups included the last time. So this is the employment by industry and where we're finding folks who have those associate degrees in nursing from the community and technical colleges, so the RNs, and we, as you can see, the general medical and surgical hospitals lead the list, but if you can work your way through, a lot of them are working in fields that you would expect are related. This does look a little different than the list that we looked at for our RNs that were coming out, for our BSNs, our RNs who had the bachelor's. So that is included here. And then the next bit of information, you all were kind of trying to determine why we'd seen that drop in terms of our nursing graduates, because we'd been looking over time, and there definitely was a flattening out that happened for a few years there. And someone asked, well, is this related or connected to, sort of a dearth of new programs in that time? Can you help us understand a little better by disaggregating the programs, what was happening? So here we have information about new programs and ongoing programs and where those enrollments were. And as you can see, the growth is not tied just to new programs. So I think we had some folks who wanted to know, hey, is the growth new programs? Is it that it was flat and then we've had a lot of new programs and that's made a difference? But you can see here what was new, what was discontinued, and sort of where we were overall. And again, you can see kind of 14, 15, a little bit of flattening out, and then it starts to pick up again, 16 and beyond. And then we did provide, in fact, I've got some PowerPoints for this. We also, and this is something Ed Buchanan did for us that I think was very helpful because we didn't realize this, we looked at the information by sector. So here's the state totals. You can kind of see you've got a build-up, then you've got a little bit of slowing in here, 13 to 15, and then you see we're starting to see a build-up again, and we wanted to try to understand what was happening there. Again, folks were thinking maybe there weren't new programs at that time, and then we added new programs. And when we looked, we saw that for universities, it's a pretty steady increase. If you looked for independents, we do see a little flattening there, but it's a little bit later in the process. But when we looked at community and technical colleges, we thought this was very interesting. We saw some real drops, pretty major growth up through 14, and then we saw some drops in 15 and 16, starting up just a little in 17. So I think a lot of that sort of flattening could be, you could look at what was happening at the two-year colleges. So it wasn't a consistent pattern across all the sectors, and we thought that was interesting. Health-related institutions, again, I think this is a steadier line that we're seeing in our career colleges, which started out with very, very low numbers, but we saw some increase there. And of course, our colleges that are for-profit aren't included right now. But we wanted to just look at our nursing graduates overall by all our sectors, just to get a flavor for what we were seeing for those patterns. So I hope that helps answer some of the questions that you raised, again, about new programs and also about what was happening by sector. Okay.
I do. This
Yes.
is Catherine Tart from the University of Houston. What is an independent institution? I'm sorry.
So yes, that's a very good question. We're so used to how we refer to our sectors. So there's a group, the Independent Colleges and Universities of Texas, and often when we say independent, we just refer to a private nonprofit institution. So sometimes when we say independent, we're specifically referring to those ICUT, Independent Colleges and Universities of Texas. Most of our independents in the state belong to that group, but there are, I believe, probably a couple of additional private nonprofits, and I do know we have a couple of, I'm looking to Stacy, a couple of nursing programs that are nonprofit at hospitals. So we would, I think, group them with independent in this case, would you say? How we collected, I think they would be included, yes, in the independent, is my understanding, and I can.
Okay, and
I guess we'll get the answer because.
Okay, excuse me. Those schools are classified as in the career sector.
Okay, so those couple that aren't in ICUT schools were in there. Okay.
Covenant Health System is in the career sector. But now there's a bunch of other institutions in the career sector that are for profit. So
Thank you. That's good clarification. So our traditional not-for-profit private institutions, basically our private universities in this case that have nursing programs, would be here with four-year independent, but are a couple of nonprofit programs that we would consider more career through the hospitals like Covenant are included with the career colleges. Good. Thank you.
And then the health-related, those are the health science centers?
Yes,
Okay,
so
making sure.
that's our health science centers around
And
the state.
so, so this is ADN and BSN altogether?
I believe these are all nursing graduates that we just looked at everything. We just pulled in any nursing grad. I don't believe that we went below the ADN.
Okay,
Is that
that's what I
correct?
asked. Yeah,
We
ADN.
didn't look at
Okay, great. Okay, so it's not
LVN and
nurses'
that
aides
type
or
of thing.
LVNs?
Right, it's not that.
Okay.
It's anyone.
So it's all pre-licensure for the,
No, these are graduates. These is
these
not
are-
pre-licensure. So this is graduates, and this is some information I know people had been looking at. We're asked to share this often when people are looking
so are
at
these
nursing.
doctoral level people too?
This is going to be everybody. Now, one of our challenges with pre-licensure is knowing who's pre-licensure and getting that information in terms of graduates. So this was just sort of an overview of when we look at all of our graduates, because we've seen patterns, we saw that slowing pattern, and we've seen it in a lot of our data. Can we look at the sectors and see if we can understand what was happening with that?
We would just like to know who these graduates are,
We
right?
can break this out into,
No, just
Oh, okay.
are they associate degree and baccalaureate?
Yep.
And that's
Associate,
it?
baccalaureate, master's, doctoral, it's anything from the ADN up.
Okay.
Yeah.
80 and up.
Correct.
So I think for the sake of this work group, prior to the next meeting, maybe if we can parse it out, even
Sure.
from the graduate level, so the APRNs, the
Yep.
DNPs from those who are ADN baccalaureate, that would be helpful.
Yeah, by sector, sure. We're happy to do that. Yeah, we weren't sure how much people wanted to dig in, but again, trying to understand some of our changing patterns.
And I think, this is Catherine Tart again, I think that would be helpful because then, that's some of the conversations that we've had. Where's the money needed? Where are we trying to increase to? How are we trying to get more? We can't get more faculty until the people have a minimum of a bachelor's degree. How are we moving that forward? And how's this money helped us move forward in those different groups?
And I think
From the 80 and
think
up,
we've-
that's fine.
Thank you. I think we provided some of that, but we'll go back and I think showing it in this format so you can see the trend lines and not just the most recent data. Do people find that helpful? So
Yeah, trend lines are helpful.
We'll go back and provide that for you.
Yeah, by sector. Sure, we're happy to do that. Yeah, we weren't sure how much people wanted to dig in, but again, trying to understand.
Hi, is there a caller from speaking? It sounds like someone's speaking, but they're very, very low. Never mind, that was just an echo.
Okay. Anything else on this particular information? If not, I will, and again, you have it in your packets, I'm going to continue on. The next analysis, and there's quite a bit of detail here, so I'm just going to make sure everyone understands what it is, and then I'm going to kind of point people to the grand totals on the bottom. This is information, you wanted to have a sense of where the money was going and tying it back to the initial licensure versus the RN to BSN versus unknown in terms of as we're looking at our RN patterns. And so, and I'll refer to Ed if we need some assistance here. He kindly put all of this together for us. So what we see is it starts with the community colleges, and it's focused on the different programs. So I'm sorry, it's focused on the regular program because that was sort of the interest. We know that over 70 and under 70 do focus on our initial licensure and enrollments and graduates. So this is information that basically looks at who is being counted in the program, where the money was going, and you can see for here, well, this is initial for our community colleges. We aren't seeing RN to BSN yet. That's something that will start coming in for those groups. So you can see their dollars are going towards initial, but then when we start to look at our universities, our state universities, we've got the categories for the initial, then the RN to BSN, and then the unknown. And you'll see that there's a lot that's unknown because we collect RPA codes to make determinations for our over and under 70 program and our grad rates, but we just count graduates in terms of our regular program, and so we do not always know if it's an initial licensure nurse who graduated. Now, in many cases, we've gotten RPA codes for initial licensure because there are dollars tied to that, but we didn't want to speculate at this point in terms of what that unknown looks like. All of you would understand at your institutions kind of how you report how that works, so you might have some sense. So where we ended up in bottom line, and this is this information is all other than community colleges. You can see we were at initial 32%, RN to BSN 10%, and unknown 58%. So we have a very large unknown there for everyone but community colleges. But then if we go to the bottom and we look at we've got some grand totals here, and I want to make sure I fully understand this. I believe this grand total at the very bottom includes all the programs. Is that correct, Ed? When we look at the 59% that we're finding initial, about 10% RN, BSN, and 31% unknown. That's all of the programs.
Okay, I think you have a list there for 2 years and totaled separately.
Oh, okay, okay. So basically, this spreadsheet was just intended to provide by institution some information on what we know at this point about initial licensure, RN to BSN, and then of course we've got some graduates that at this point in terms of the data that we've collected and needed thus far for the program, we've got some unknowns in terms of whether they were initial or not. And the unknowns were actually quite high when we looked at it, and I think you might remember Ed from a prior meeting trying to explain that we don't fully know at this point with the data that we have. So something to think about moving forward, certainly in terms of the information we have, how the program is structured. Have I characterized that appropriately? And this might be something that takes a little while for people to digest, and we're happy to answer any questions either later today if you need information. But again, the community colleges are pretty straightforward because we're pretty much seeing initial licensure at this point. Yes, Dr. Zolnarek, yeah.
So, and I'm trying to wrap my head around this. But
yeah, it's a lot.
Fiscal year 2019, the percentages in the different buckets are considerably different than the percentages in the buckets for fiscal year 2020.
Can you tell us what page you're looking at?
I'm looking at, has 22 at the bottom, where it's 59.3% for initial, 9.6 for RN to BSN, and 31% unknown, versus for 19, it's kind of flipped. The largest bucket is unknown, and this, is 58%, as opposed with initial being 31.2%. That's on page 20.
Oh, okay. So if we look at
they're very different. I just wondered if there's.
You're right. They are. That's a very good question. Ed?
I'd like to try to address that. The reason for that difference is you have 2 different program years with a different mix of institutions. So that is partly the reason for the change. But I would say even sometimes if you take an institution laterally through time, those numbers will vary. To explain the dynamics of how we determine an initial licensure student, we take a name on the 009, John Doe graduated. So then our data people will go back and search a prior CBM 001 in a prior period, searching for an RPA code. Sometimes we find it, sometimes we don't. So it's kind of a hit or a miss thing because in some cases, obviously for the regular program, the RPA code is not needed. But when you get to the over and under program, it's critical that we have that. Otherwise, you don't get funding if for the over and under program if there isn't an RPA code. So
is the RPA code how you differentiate the pre-licensure?
Yes.
yes,
So it's a restricted program admission code, and those are special codes that were added to our enrollment report when Ed was referring to the CBM 001. That's the information we get every semester about enrollments. That's the information where if someone's an initial licensure and the different categories of nurses, that's included, and we need those for over 70 and under 70 to know when someone starts to look through, sort of track the outcomes. But for the regular program, we just base it on graduates in certain SIP codes, so there are some cases where we don't have those restricted program admission codes. And certainly, I know reporting came up as a challenge. There might, certainly folks could think about if there's information that would be helpful. It's certainly not just for this type of understanding what's going on, because it's a long process to introduce new coding and think about that. But certainly if you're thinking about making suggestions for how the program might work, there are ways to consider getting additional information. But those codes were built in so that the program could be administered. So we use them as best we can to answer other types of questions about what's happening. Did that all make sense? There's a lot of moving parts. But thank you. It is helpful at least to get some feel, I think, first of all, for the variation, and then also for what's happening with the unknown, that we certainly have folks who are earning dollars in the regular program where we are not sure what category those nurses would fit into. If they're programs where there's also participation in the over and under 70, it's interesting that I think generally we get codes for those. Okay, well, I think this has been a good discussion, and it's allowed us some time. I'm going to look over to our statistician. He's still working on it here, and oh, they're still coming in, so we're making good progress there. I believe that's all of the data that we had to share, so I think while he continues to work, I'm going to hand it back to Ginger to maybe talk through what we're going to be doing next, and then hopefully we'll have that information available, and we'll get some copies printed out for our groups when it's ready.
Sure, thank you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt one more time. I should have asked, is there, aside from what you've already requested, is there any other data that you've been thinking about that you'd like to have for the next meeting? And certainly if you think of something as you're meeting in your groups, which might well happen, let us know. Okay, sorry, Ginger. Go.
Sure. So what we are going to do after we get the results from Gordon, we're going to break out into our groups again, You'll notice that on your name tag, a number is it on the name tags, the numbers? Mm-hmm. Yes, so your assigned number is on your name plate, rather, and we will break out into groups. And those of you calling in, you're going to get your own group, just like last time, because that seemed to work well, and then the rest of you will be divided into two. And during that 30 minutes, we're going to ask you to address the top challenges. So the group work is going to be dependent on the results from the survey, which is why we felt like it was really important for you to rank those issues so we know where we need to focus for the next discussion, because we didn't want to repeat work that you've already given us. So we're going to think about that as much as we can for 30 minutes, and then we're going to take a break. And then we're going to come back together for 30 minutes and exchange the conversations. So groups 1 and 2 will switch their ideas and share as a way to share with one another. But we're also going to discuss as a large group for the latter part of the meeting when we come back together. So think about your group work is going to happen for about an hour or so, an hour or more. And in between there, we're probably going to take a break. But as Gordon is still working, does anyone feel the need for a break right now as we wait for Gordon? Okay.
And I'm going to make one clarification to kind of, and I think, again, this is your group and your work, and we want to make sure that you're able to use the breakout time and how you think it works best. But one other thing we thought we would try to do after we sort of spend half an hour talking about the challenges. Oh, okay. Oh, you want to wait to get to the results in terms of thinking about the piece that, okay, in terms of building it. Okay, got it.
I want to give specific instructions for the breakouts after we have the results, because you're going to process that information.
Oh, got it, okay.
A little bit.
Very good.
Once you know actually the tasks, the content that you'll be exploring.
Great,
So, well, what I would like to do is just give you a few moments of free time. You can use that as screen time. You can actually talk to one another. What we want to give Gordon, we don't want to make him feel pressured to get those results and have them be inaccurate. So rather than just be a talking head, I'd rather you talk with one another. Oh, yes.
May I ask you a question? TC Ume from Tarrant County College. I recently accepted a student who graduated from a university in UK. He already has a bachelor degree in nursing and practicing as a nurse in Texas, but he would like to move to California. And he found out that he doesn't have enough hours, or he hasn't completed any pediatric, OB, and mental health clinical and theory hours. So he's going to complete those 6 courses, mental health theory, clinical, PD, OB, theory, clinical with us. But he already have license, and he will not graduate, but we will use space for him. Can we count those type of special students as an enrollment, or I was just wondering. He's not going to award any associate degree. But
Yeah, so it wouldn't be included in the data that is collected. Yeah, that's correct.
On a side, it would be helpful to know what schools are able to accommodate those requests, because I do get contacted by individuals that are moving from other countries, and typically that don't have the mental health and the women's health components to be able to be eligible for licensure. So if there are schools that are able to accommodate that, it's real helpful for me to know that.
I'm glad to hear this come up, because we do get a lot of calls from people trying to get a license here or in another state. Every state has different regulations, and there aren't many schools who are willing to help them. So if your school is, let us know. We also get those calls.
Yeah, we're from Temple College, and we do allow them to come in to take classes, but not clinical, because we don't have enough clinical space. So we won't accommodate them for clinical, but we will for classes. And we actually have had 2 students this last year that were in our PD and OB classes.
And it was looking like we're very, very close here, so they were doing a double check, make sure we get everything correct, and then I could probably go out and read out the results, and we can get them on the flash drive. Okay, yeah, and we'll make copies for everyone too.
This is Polly Church joining by phone. I had a quick question.
Sure, yes, please, let's use this time.
I was hearing a little bit of static, so I may have missed an instruction. Will you cue us when it's time for those of us on the phone to step out of the primary phone call and call the breakout session?
Yes, we will definitely do that, and we've provided everyone with the numbers. So what we did at the last meeting is those people calling in, we'd stayed in this room, but we found it was not the easiest setting, so we've set up in a smaller room to have a conference call, and we have included some people who are here. So we've mixed it up a little bit from who was included in the groups prior, but group 3 is going to be the people calling in, and we do have some people here also assigned to that so that it can feel more like a conversation than it did at the last meeting. So we will cue you very shortly and let you know, and we'll move into the groups. And so I'm going to, hopefully we're very close. We've got a discussion going here, and if we don't have it, I think we'll just move to breaking out. So just a moment.
Thank you.
Oh, we've got it. Okay, so now we've just got to get it in the system, and we should be good to go. Okay, so I have got the information, and when my computer finishes scanning it to make sure it's secure, I'll go ahead and open it. And then we'll put it on a flash drive, but I do have as soon as it goes through our... Yeah, we're going to, but I thought I can start to share something if we have a technical problem. These scans are...
While we wait for the file to process, I just want a reminder to any of you watching from home, all the materials we've talked about and shown you here are posted on the event site, and we will likely post these results on the event site too.
Here's our results, and we'll print these out and share them with the groups, and then we can move forward to our breakout groups. And these are not sorted yet, correct, with our weighted totals. So we're going to look through and sort of see where we ended up for our highest. We've got 69 for prioritization of initial licensure nurses. So that was our top item in terms of priorities. And what we did is we weighted, so if you ordered something as number 2, it would get a little less weight than as number 1, all the way down the line to make sure we weren't just taking everyone's top choices and see what came up, but also to do the weighting. In terms of timing issues, that is tied for second, if I'm reading this correctly. So that has to do program logistics and timing issues, and that tied for second with funding is not consistent or predictable. And then we're moving from there to, I believe, lack of clinical spaces. So that's going to be our number, it's actually number 4 since we had 2 number 2s. And then I believe we're going to capacity as number 5, and then there's quite a break until we get to 6, which is degree level populations in terms of that. And then it kind of drops, I missed one. I'm sorry. Number 5 is going to be unearned funds. Requirement to return unearned funds leads to challenges with planning. And so there we go. So I think that gives us through 7, and we'll go ahead and sort them before we print them out and share them, but that gives us our totals. Okay.
For those of us on the phone, could you just repeat those since we won't have the printout?
I will, and we'll make sure we email it to you as well. So number 1 is prioritization of initial licensure nurses. Then we had a tie at 66 for number 2. 1 is timing issues involving program logistics. So planning and budget challenges, hiring challenges, et cetera, tied to the timing. Also tied for, and I'm sorry, that was number 2. Number 3, at just 1 number below, trying to do this quickly, is funding is not consistent or predictable, difficult to hire faculty with one-time money, et cetera. Number 4 is lack of clinical spaces. Number 5 is capacity in terms of faculty. And then number 6 is requirement to return unearned funds leads to caution about spending and planning. Number 7 has to do with selecting the correct degree level. I think I've got that correct. And number 8 is capacity in terms of facilities. And then it drops from there in terms of the weighting. There's actually some pretty big gaps when we move into complexity, student diversity, reporting and communication, nurses not from Texas. So those are our results. Thank you for your patience. As we did this, we'll provide them to everyone in the groups. And I'm going to turn it over to Ginger now for just some final comments before we move.
Okay, great. So what we're working on doing is getting you hard copies where they are ranked. They're sorted by rank, so you can see the top 5 to 7 for your discussion. What we would like you to do as you break out into your teams is to think about those top 5 challenges. And during this first 30 minutes, we're asking your group to have a focused discussion of solutions for those top 5 challenges. Now, the first one was about initial licensures, and that is one of the direct tasks for the work group, to think about how to increase the number of nurses to address the nursing shortage. But again, we want you to think wholly on solutions during this first 30 minutes. So what that means is that we are assuming we are all on the same page in identifying the challenges. That's why we went through the survey. So try to limit any time or not spend any time thinking about what the challenges are, and just focus on the ones that have been identified before you as a group, and think through what are possible solutions. This is sort of a safe space. There's no wrong answers. All ideas are welcome as long as they're framed as ideas towards solutions. Okay, any questions on that for this first 30 minutes? Okay, so those of you who are labeled group 1, give me a show of hands. You are going to be staying in this room, and you'll go over to the table here so that you don't look like you're being webcast as the only group. So you'll move over here, and Dr. Stacy Silverman will facilitate that conversation. Number 2, raise your hands, please. We are going to go into the room that's called Tejas. It's the same room we were in before. I will be facilitating that conversation. And then those of you who are number 3, you can raise your hands, but I won't see you because you are calling in. Oh, you're number 3. Yes, is there another number 3 in the room? Okay, so you're going to go into this a smaller room that's an annex to the Tejas room, and those calling from home are going to hang up and dial into a different number to participate in that conversation, and Dr. Julie Eklund will be facilitating that conversation. So let's break for those rooms, not a break, but just walk to your room, walk to your table, and we're gonna have a great discussion for 30 minutes, and then we're gonna take a break. But let's break now for 30 minutes for your groups.
Okay, good. And I'm going to leave this up. I'm just going to hide the columns, and then we
So we'll just wait a moment for everyone to come back in the room.
Those of you on the phone, we're coming back into the main room. Okay. Oops, I'm gonna mute. Whoops, oh no, I think I just hung up. Did I just hang up? I did.
Okay, I have to get the number. So you pass these out
Okay.
to the folks that didn't get them?
Yep, if we could, sorry about that, I just thought it was the. I think it doesn't, so why don't we check back and,
Well, maybe it's in the materials and I didn't see it. The timeline shared.
So the timeline is that, now did you share one? Because no one shared one. So we were supposed to do a. Okay, because we were gonna do a comparison of what we do with what all of you do, and we asked people to share a timeline with us, and no one.
We have ours, but we don't have everybody else.
But we didn't have everyone else's, and that was the plan, just to share it. Okay, no, that's okay. Well, we can do that for the next, I think we can.
Have one more.
Oh.
We're waiting for one more.
One more person?
Yeah.
Oh. Well. We can, I think.
Okay, so we said on our agenda that we would wrap up around 12:30, so we want to be very respectful of your time so that you can go out and have that beautiful lunch in beautiful Austin, Texas. So we are going to, once again, break out in our groups for 30 minutes. So let me just stress 30 minutes. The conversations I know you had in your group were rich and very productive, but we do need to try to maximize our time. This is going to be, we want you to think creatively. We want you to feel like you can throw out any idea, but please frame it in the way of a solution. And that will help save time too. So for this next 30 minutes, here's what we would like you to do. We'd like you to think about a program design. What would you do? How would you think through building a program that would include the solutions you talked about in the first 30 minutes? So think about maybe those first 30 minutes, those ideas, or all of those are puzzle pieces. How would you fit them together as a program? And think about that in the next 30 minutes. Then we'll come back together and share our ideas. Yes?
By program, do you mean a funding program or do you mean a nursing program?
You tell us.
Yeah, I mean, we're thinking about a funding, a state funding. It doesn't have to be structured along the lines of the current NSRP. It could be, but just given that there's funding available to address some of these challenges that we're seeing with the current program that we have, based on your discussions about solutions, what would a program, so I think a funding program would be.
Although, if there's something you would change about the nursing half to influence the funding half, we would feel free to share that idea. That's why I kind of said.
And that might involve funding if there is something. Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay, so your facilitators have a little bit more they can share about that, and we have some tools to help you think through this. So let's get back in our groups. Thank you.
Yep, and we're going to ask for those of you for the breakout groups, if they want to go ahead again and call in. We'll continue our discussion working with our whiteboard in the Tejas Annex. Thanks.
Minutes, because we want to be respectful of your time, is have each group share their overarching program idea, and if it is appropriate, share like the top 2 ideas out of that program design. Each group will get roughly 3 to 4 minutes, because we have a little bit of wrap-up things we need to do before you all leave us today. Stacy, are you reporting for your group, or is someone else going to report?
Someone else is reporting.
Oh, Marla is reporting. So if you, yes, if you would please make sure your mic is on and share the larger idea, and if you want 2 or 3 specifics out of there.
You're talking about our last
The
group
last
session.
30 minutes, not 30 seconds, the last 30 minutes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or, okay, well, how about this? I can start for group 2 while we wait for you to get your things. How about, is that okay?
We're just getting our board.
Okay.
But you can go to group 2.
Yes, sure. So group 2, and I'm sharing, I apologize because I forgot to assign someone else to share. This group really wanted to focus on teacher or faculty recruitment and retention as their program, as the overarching theme of the design. And fleshed out a lot of great ideas on how to do that. The ones that stood out to me as being someone not familiar necessarily with this field is really focusing on incentives to attract teachers and faculty. Things like tax breaks, specific loans, specific scholarships, specific forgiveness, but also retaining them in terms of specific salary benefits. Like, for example, someone mentioned in Virginia, their governor said automatically, if you become one of our faculty, part of our faculty, you get a 10% increase above what your institution would normally offer you. And while that may be challenging to implement because it came from such a high level of leadership in Virginia, it was effective. So that was, I thought, a very interesting idea. The other thing, as a recruitment tool, I think you're able to offer faculty, full-time faculty, that their children will go to your institution for free. But extending that not just to the students of those, or the children of those of faculty, but to the faculty themselves. So those were some ideas that really struck me as excellent tools that we might be able to build into a design to recruit and retain faculty, because the retention is a really important piece of this conversation, because their faculty are not being paid market value relative to going to work as nurses. If we can match and sustain that market value, that would really help resolve the issue. So, given everything else, pretending that everything else in the world worked perfectly, that was going to be our program design. Was that group one? Group two? Sorry, is that?
And they can't be unfunded mandates.
No, it
And
has
they
to
cannot be on the backs of students. So it would.
Yeah.
That would.
All of this,
where the funding would come from.
Right, our program would become ultimately statutorily mandated. That's how we would make sure that it actually happened. Yes, now going ahead, Marla, would you like to share group one?
Group one. First of all, it's that we wanted to take the 3 programs and just have one. It's like that was, if we're looking at what we have now, have one pot of money, and that no givebacks. It's like you earn the money and so you're able to use that money. That it's not just you don't sit there and be afraid to use it. So it would be annual funding versus looking at those 2 years and doing the projections and everything. Okay, so I said one pot of funding, and then that we really looked at perhaps weighting different factors. So, because we know the legislature is going to be looking for some type of measurable outcome, right? They're not going to just take our qualitative data necessarily, they want quantitative. So if we looked at weighting, like for increasing initial licensure, if that was one of the largest weights, and then we looked at increasing pass rates, retaining faculty, and that you build in maintenance. So if you're maintaining those students and maintaining that quality over time, that would be one way to use this money. We talked about quality improvement, professional development, incentives for faculty hires, just like you're saying. And let's see. I think that's about it. Does anybody have anything else from group one that I missed?
Okay, yes, thank you. Group 3.
And I guess Beverly and I compared notes, and she's going to let me provide the feedback, but she'll jump in if she needs to. And hopefully we've got our group back on the call. We also had I think it was a fairly concrete discussion that we had sort of one outside the box idea. But our program, what we talked about was something that would be 2 years combined. So you're not looking at anything year to year. So you're finding out that, no, this year you didn't do as well as the last. But the approach would be that you'd have a 3, 4, or 5 year rolling average, and you would fund up front. But having that rolling average and the fact that it's over 2 years, and it's not 2 years sort of intermittent with some pieces you're looking at every year, but over 2 years with that average, the funding up front would have a lot more there'd be a lot more stability, and so it'd be a lot easier in terms of keeping faculty and understanding what's going to happen with the money. It would have a clear and transparent timeline that would be simplified, and we would work to think about ways to simplify it, such as having maybe some kind of a different reporting cycle, because if you get graduates once a year and that comes at a time when it's sort of after the funding cycle, that's not as effective. So think about how can you create a timeline that's really clear, transparent, and allows schools to really plan. So again, kind of aligning that and maybe adjusting some reporting. We also talked about weighting initial licensure. So we did have a similar conversation about weighting. One idea was to have just a smaller pot of money that's for RN to BSN. And some of the understanding of the importance for that was that from that group, sometimes you get your faculty and your people going beyond there. So maybe there's some value to having that, but definitely everyone agreed there should be more weighting. There should be more emphasis on the initial licensure. And in terms of outside the box, we talked about clinicals and just some ideas for how you could have, and I'm going to maybe dedicate, I might turn to you, Beverly, for this, or the folks who called in.
We talked about a dedicated education unit that was, because facilities, a lot of facilities, the faculty was bringing up, I mean, the directors about they have empty space, and that one person was in Australia, and she said that they had these dedicated education units, which we've heard of, you know, and there's a lot of detail that goes into it, but that's what, and we also talked about the one program, I think that group one talked about.
We did one, but it would be funded up front instead of at the end. Thank you very much for reminding me. So that's where we came out. And anyone else want to add who's listening in? Did we miss anything?
Okay, great. So it sounds like groups 1 and 3 were on a similar page. You know, group 2, our discussion just evolved into a particular area, but that would fit nicely into a program if we all came together and merged our 3 ideas, I think. So we have 6 minutes left. We need to think about a next meeting date, and then also how we want to use that time. So one of the activities we ran out of time for today was that we wanted to sort of trade papers for grading. As an analogy, we wanted to trade program design ideas between groups and have each group sort of pick out what they felt was the best ideas and maybe the ideas that weren't particularly salient to the urgency, the immediate problem of the nursing shortage. But we ran out of time for that. So I don't know, do we want to table that for next time?
I think we could share. I think we could, you know, we're getting the beginnings of some ideas, some straw men, so I think we could try to get these sort of in writing a little clearer and share them with everyone as part of the minutes, and then we could get people's feedback on the pieces they liked or didn't. Does that sound like a
No, I think that's
approach?
a great idea. So it means you'll be getting homework. Is everyone okay with homework? Okay, great.
And this is Catherine Tart. Could y'all send the timeline that Mr. Buchanan had? And then that will help for us who are visual.
Yes.
Kind of see how could that maybe possibly work.
Yes, we will.
Because
And I think we understand now what
nice idea
what we need
that he
for
did
that.
for us.
Thanks.
Okay, great. So we will send you all of the ideas that were laid out in each group with the understanding that you are going to review them. And do you want them to share their critiques or back with us before the next meeting or during the next meeting?
I think before the next meeting, because I think that will give us more time during the meeting.
Okay.
And, you know, we'll try to be, I think probably we had a fairly tight timeline between meetings this time. Maybe we'll have a little larger window for this next one since you have this homework, and we'll think of some way to bring that in, whether it's through an informal survey with just open spaces for you to provide information so we can kind of tally up who's saying what, or a spreadsheet or something. Yeah, so we'll get you a format to give feedback to us. And
So what are your thoughts on the next time we meet? Do you want it to be, we had talked at one point about meeting like every 6 weeks or tried a month or 6 weeks, or what are you feeling like now? What do you want in terms of your professional timelines? When can you come back? 6 weeks?
kind of early April?
Okay.
Would that kind of
Early
be?
April? Okay. So,
Oh, yeah, we've got to,
Just a quick question. Are we on track to meeting the legislative timeline?
I think we're fine. I think we're fine for early April. We've got to get something ready for our board for November. In fact, they changed our board meeting schedule, so that actually added a month of time that we have to do this work. So I think we're fine.
okay, great.
And I'm going to ask, because one thing we've been planning is to have someone come and talk about what people are doing in other states, kind of have a national expert come and talk about some of that. We're trying to work that out. Would that be helpful to everyone to have that? We weren't able to get it for today, but we'll put that on the agenda. And if we can't get the outside, we can at least, we've been doing some research, so we'll at least be able to share what we've been able to find. Okay, great.
Great idea.
Okay, so the last meeting, we actually talked about dates during this time, but I don't think we have time to talk about actual dates. We will figure out a date for early April and send that out and then figure that out by email. We have you're right, we do have 2 minutes.
Yep.
But the other piece we needed to discuss is, aside from bringing in a national expert last time, do you want the next meeting to be structured like this, where it's 3 hours and we have great group breakouts? Because our earlier meetings were shorter. Okay, so you like the breakouts and you like the 3 hours you're willing to give, so thank you for that. And okay, well, we will use that as a model for the next meeting. Okay, we've got 90 seconds now. So are there any dates in early April we should avoid?
That's a good question, yeah. Good question.
So you don't want to meet on April Fool's Day. Okay, and so April 1st and 2nd are out. Any other dates that?
I think avoiding Good Friday, maybe sometime
Probably
before we start
avoiding
getting into.
April 10th is Good Friday.
And that's the 10th, okay. So
Yeah.
somewhere in that, we can send out several possible days, maybe. We'll look at
Okay.
when the boardroom's available and do a doodle poll or some kind of poll.
You're out that entire week?
Okay.
Okay, so maybe the week after Good Friday? How does that look for everyone?
That's getting late. I'm a little concerned about, but well, why don't we send dates for those first 2 weeks, and we'll see who can do what. And, you know, we're never, I think, going to get everyone, and we will have the call-in option, so if people have that availability to call in. I do get concerned about the timeline if we go
understand.
too long.
I'm almost.
Okay.
Maybe we'll pick a date or two. Again, if things aren't available, we might move past that, but we'll avoid the Friday and Monday around Easter
Okay.
weekend.
Okay. Well, unless there are any emergency final comments, I will close this work group meeting. Thank you for your time today. We really value your input. We can't do this without you, so thank you so much. Your ideas were wonderful.
Yes, thank everyone.
Safe travels.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of those who listened in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.